Hello, I am Philippe Girard from the History Department at McNeese State University.
And I'm Amber Hale, an assistant professor in the biology department. Welcome to Your Grandma Rocks, where we explore the lives of famous women in history.
Welcome and bienvenue à nos amis francophones. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
On the program today, music and history as we retrace the life of a remarkable woman. She was an army nurse, and an Amazon, and a superhero, and she could even force men to tell the truth. Her name was Wonder Woman.
Of course, we're not speaking here about the comic book character, but about the man
And the women.
who created Wonder Woman.
Our program will take us on a journey from Harvard University to the suffragette movement, the invention of the lie detector test, some bondage sessions, and a plural marriage. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. In keeping with today's theme, we'll feature songs about superwomen and female empowerment.
And we will start with Superwoman by Alicia Keys.
Nothing seems complete. I stand up and I'm searching for the better part of me. I hang my head from sorrow. So much state of humanity. What's up? Wearing on my shoulders, gotta find the strength in me. Why's that? 'Cause I am a superwoman. Yes, I am. Yes, she is. Still when I'm a mess, I still put on a vest, but then there's so much else. Oh yes, I'm a superwoman. That's right. Yeah, this is for all the mothers fighting, for better days to come. They coming. And all my women sitting here trying to come home before the sun. And all my sisters coming together, say yes I will, yes I can. Why is that? 'Cause I am a superwoman. Yes I am. Sing it out there. Yes she is. Still when I'm a mess, still put on a vest, but then
Welcome back to Your Grammar Rocks, brought to you from McNeese State University. We just listened to Superwoman by Alicia Keys. My name is Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hale. Today we're exploring the story behind Wonder Woman.
Intriguingly, that story starts with a man, William Marston, who was born in Massachusetts in 1893.
He was a man, but he grew up in a very female household. He was an only son, and his mother had 4 unwed sisters who all lived together in the home. So he was doted on as a boy, to say the least.
This may explain Marston's early interest in women's issues, but also his taste for large households filled with women, catering to his every need.
He was a precocious child, very smart, but with some psychological issues. He was obsessed with suicide, and he came very close to killing himself with cyanide at the age of 18.
Fortunately, he backed out at the last minute, otherwise we would not have a program today. But he used that early brush with death as the inspiration for Dr. Poison, one of the characters in Wonder Woman.
When it came time to attend college, Marston went to Harvard University, where he got a Bachelor's of Arts and later a PhD.
His main interest was psychology, but he had a tense relationship with the psychology professor at Harvard, Thomas Murstenberg, who was quite the sexist.
Marston got his revenge later on. He modeled one of the evil characters in Wonder Woman after the German professor. That would be Dr. Psycho.
Sexism was rampant at the time among Harvard professors, so Holiday College, where many Wonder Woman stories take place and which was modeled after Harvard, was filled with bad guys and woman haters.
In fact, Harvard did not fully admit women to its undergraduate degree until 1977.
So that created a problem for Elizabeth Holloway, Marston's childhood sweetheart and later his wife. She was extremely smart and could easily have followed her husband to Harvard, but she was denied admission on account of her sex.
So Holloway attended Mount Holyoke College instead, and then she went to law school at Boston University, and then she got a master's at Radcliffe.
That kind of gender discrimination was coming under attack nationally as part of the suffragette movement.
In 1911, the same year Marston began his freshman year at Harvard, Emmeline Pankhurst, the famous British suffragette, was invited by some Harvard students to give a lecture on women's suffrage.
The university was not pleased at all, and they barred her from speaking on campus. And instead, Pankhurst had to give her speech in Harvard Square.
Marston's interest in women's liberation is evident in early Wonder Woman stories, which included a 4-page insert about famous women in history, starting with suffragettes like Susan B. Anthony.
A common theme in the suffragette literature of the time was the Amazon, the female heroes of Greek mythology. And sure enough, Wonder Woman hails from Paradise Island, which is run by Amazon women.
In the comic book, there is a sharp distinction between the ideal society of Paradise Island and the real world, the world of men, which is plagued by violence. That surely reflects Marston's dissatisfaction with the world he lived in.
In honor of Emmeline Pankhurst, we'll stop here for a minute and listen to the Sister Suffragette song featured in the 1964 Disney musical, Mary Poppins.
We're clearly soldiers in petticoats and dauntless crusaders for women's votes. Though we adore men individually, we agree that as a group they're rather stupid.
Mrs. Banks!
Cast off the shackles of yesterday, shoulder to shoulder into the fray. Our daughters' daughters will adore us, and they'll sing in grateful chorus. Well done, Sister Suffragette.
Be that as it may, I do not wish to offend, but
From Kensington to Billingsgate, one hears the restless cries. From every corner of the land, womankind arise! Political equality and equal rights with men. Take heart, for Mrs. Pankhurst has been clapped in irons again. No more the meek and mild subservience we. We're fighting for our rights militantly. Never you fear!
if I may have a word, Mrs. Banks.
So cast off the shackles of yesterday and shoulder to shoulder into the fray. Our daughters' daughters will adore us, and they'll sing in grateful chorus. Well done, Banks! Well done!
Welcome back. I'm Amber Hale, co-host of Your Grandma Rocks, a program that introduces you to the lives of remarkable women in history. Today we're talking about the man and women behind the comic book character Wonder Woman.
And I am Philippe Girard. We just listened to the song Sister Suffragette, sung by the actress Glynis Jones in the musical Mary Poppins.
I really like the line, Mrs. Pankhurst has been clapped in irons again. It is pretty appropriate considering how we just explained how Emmeline Pankhurst was prevented from speaking at Harvard University in defense of women's suffrage.
You'll notice that the line speaks of putting her in irons. And another line in the song also speaks of, quote, casting off the shackles of yesterday. Chains were a common theme in suffragette iconography.
As a form of protest, U.S. and British suffragettes would often tie themselves to the railings of public monuments. Did their tactic influence the creator of Wonder Woman as well?
It sure did. You might get the kids away from the radio set for the next couple of minutes.
So we're about to cover some racy topics.
Let's just say that Marston, the creator of Wonder Woman, had a personal obsession with bondage. I will let him explain himself on the matter. Quote, the only hope for peace is to teach people who are full of pep and unbound force to enjoy being bound. Only when the control of self by others is more pleasant than the unbound assertion of self in human relationship can we hope for a stable, peaceful human society. Giving to others, being controlled by them, submitting to other people cannot possibly be enjoyable without a strong erotic element. Unquote.
Wow. I think we often think of people of the Victorian era as straight-laced men and women in frocks and petticoats, but they could be pretty kinky.
They were pretty straight-laced, all right?
Well, at least now I know why Wonder Woman is so often bound by villains in the early comics. Marston was just fulfilling some fantasies of his.
Yes.
And I also know where the lasso of truth comes from.
Yes, but there's more to say about that lasso of truth, which we will cover after our next musical break.
What song do you have in store for us?
I will keep it a surprise. Let's just say that it involves kinky women.
She's a very kinky girl, the kind you don't take home to mother. She will never let your spirits down once you get her off the street. Oh, girl. She likes the
Welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks on KVYS. I'm Amber Hale.
And I am Philippe Girard. We just listened to Super Freak by Rick James.
Today we are covering the life of William Marston and Elizabeth Holloway, the couple behind the comic book character Wonder Woman. Okay, Philippe, before the break you had promised that you would tell us the story behind the lasso of truth.
And I did not lie to you. Remember that Marston and Holloway were trained as psychologists as well as lawyers. Marston was particularly interested in figuring out how to tell if people told the truth.
Which could be very useful in judicial proceedings, of course.
Right. So he invented a machine that used physiological factors like blood pressure to determine if a suspect was lying or not.
The polygraph?
Yes. And he first tried to use it in a case involving James Fry, a man who had been accused of murder. Instead of using traditional types of evidence to prove his client's innocence, Marston got him to take a lie detector test.
But that was a pretty untested scientific tool at that point.
That was exactly the judge's opinion, so the judge refused to accept the lie detector test as evidence. Marston appealed, but an appeals court confirmed the decision in the case Fry v. United States in 1923.
That's what we call the Fry standard today. Courts can only use scientific tools as evidence when there is a widespread agreement in the scientific community that the tool is accurate.
Which was not the case for Marston's brand new polygraph.
Yes, so Marston stuck with the fantasy version of this polygraph, the lasso of truth, wielded by Wonder Woman. He doesn't seem to have been very successful as a lawyer.
No, his client Fry was sentenced to life in prison. Marston was not too successful as an engineer and a businessman either, because his polygraph never made him any money.
The irony, of course, is that Marston himself was quite the liar. In fact, most of what we are talking about today was not known by the general public until the book, The Secret History of Wonder Woman, which came out in 2014.
That book is really a great read. I had the chance to attend a roundtable hosted by Jill Lepore at Harvard a few years back, and that was really a treat to hear how she uncovered all the secrets behind the creation of Wonder Woman.
Time for another song?
Let's go for it. Since we're speaking about all the liars and dirty cheats of the world, I thought we could let Taylor Swift tell us how to shake it off.
I stay out too late. Got nothing in my brain. That's what people say. That's what people say. I go on too many dates, but I can't make them stay. At least that's what people say. That's what people say. But I keep cruising. Can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. 'Cause the player's gonna play, 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 play. And the haters gonna hate, 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 baby. I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, 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 break. And the faker's gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. I never miss a beat. I'm lightning on my feet. And that's what they don't see. That's what they don't see. I'm dancing on my own. I'll make the moves up as I go. And that's what they don't know. That's what they don't know. But I keep cruising. Can't stop, won't stop grooving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. 'Cause the player's gonna play, 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 play. And the haters gonna hate, 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 baby. I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, 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 break. And the faker's gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. Shake it off, shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off.
Hey, hey, hey! Just think, while you've been getting down and out about the liars and the dirty, dirty cheats of the world, you could have been getting down to this sick beat.
My ex-man brought his new girlfriend. She's like, oh my god, but I'm just gonna shake into the fella over there with the hella good hair. Won't you come on over, baby? We can shake, shake, shake. Yeah. 'Cause the player's gonna play, 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 play. And the haters gonna hate, 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 baby. I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, break,
You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks. I'm Amber Hale.
And I am Philippe Girard. Today, we are retracing the story behind Wonder Woman.
So far, we've seen how the creator of Wonder Woman, William Marston, was linked to the suffragette movement through his wife, Elizabeth Holloway. But there were other links between Marston and other progressive causes.
One of his students was a young lady named Olive Byrne.
She was the niece of Margaret Sanger, the famous advocate of contraception.
Sanger was a nurse by training, and she was the one who delivered little Olive, her sister's baby.
That baby didn't have an easy start in life. The father was a drunk, and he threw the newborn baby outside in the snow. Olive would have died if Margaret Sanger had not been there to rescue her.
And the rest of Byrne's childhood was equally harrowing. Her mother and her aunt were so involved in the birth control movement that they had little time for baby Olive, who essentially grew up as an orphan.
So when Marston met Olive, when she became his student, she was quite vulnerable.
To say the least, and the two became romantically involved at that point.
You mean this self-proclaimed feminist took on a young mistress?
Not only that, but one day Marston came back home to his wife, Elizabeth Holloway, and announced that he wanted his mistress to move in permanently with him.
Wow.
This was a time when divorce was not really an option for upper-class women, so Holloway didn't really have a choice, and she reluctantly agreed. Interestingly, Olive Byrne always wore distinctive, heavy bracelets, and these were the inspiration for the ones that Wonder Woman wears in the comics.
I assume that polyamorous marriages were not too common in the 1920s. What did their neighbors have to say about it?
Well, Marston, the inventor of the lie detector test, simply invented one big lie to cover the whole arrangement. Officially, Olive Byrne was a relative of his who had lost her husband in World War I, and Marston had kindly welcomed her into the household and eventually adopted her two orphan children so that they would have a father.
I assume that the real father was actually Marston.
Exactly.
So he pretended to adopt the very children he had with his mistress.
Yes.
And they all lived with his children from his legal wife.
Yes.
And all those children didn't know that they were all related.
That's correct.
And he managed to hide the fact that he was polygamous from his own kids, even though his second wife lived with them.
That's correct. Essentially, his legal wife, Holloway, was a bread earner. She had a very successful career as a business executive, whereas Marston was never able to get tenure at his various teaching jobs. So Holloway provided financial security for the whole family. She also helped Marston with his various academic publications, though she was rarely listed as a co-author. Meanwhile, Olive Byrne did all the domestic duties of a traditional housewife. She raised her kids as well as those of Holloway. And then there was a third woman who regularly came to stay in the family home and who played the role of the mistress, if you will.
Wow. Can we listen to that song about the liars and cheaters of the world again?
We could, but there are too many songs on that theme, so we'll try a different one. I'm a big fan of Crazy by Patsy Cline.
Crazy, I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. I'm crazy, crazy for feeling so blue. I knew you'd love me as long as you wanted, and then someday you'd leave me for somebody new. Worry, why do I let myself worry? Wondering what in the world did I do? Oh, crazy for thinking that my love could hold you. I'm crazy for trying and crazy for crying, and I'm crazy for loving you. Crazy for thinking that my love could hold you. crazy for loving you.
Welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks. I'm Amber Hale.
And I am Philippe Girard. Today we're talking about William Marston, Elizabeth Holloway, and Olive Byrne, the polyamorous couple behind the comic book character Wonder Woman.
So far, we've seen Marston try and fail as a psychologist, as an inventor, as a lawyer, and as a professor. But I don't remember ever getting to Wonder Woman. When did he eventually create this character?
Fairly late in his life. He was born in 1893, but it was not until the 1930s that comic books really took off in America. Superman began in 1938, followed by Batman in 1939.
And that's when Marston jumped on the comic book wagon.
His timing was perfect. He created Wonder Woman in 1941, right when the US entered World War II.
So, like Captain America, she fought the Nazis and defended the American way of life. Her official alias was Diana Prince, an army nurse.
But her character was also used to showcase the themes that had fascinated Marston all his life. Amazons, bondage, lie detectors, and most importantly, feminism.
The character was a big hit, though I wonder if readers were attracted to the feminist message or to the revealing outfit and the kinky red boots. At any rate, that was the first time in his life that Marston was genuinely successful at something.
And that was the last time in his life, too. He contracted polio and then cancer, and he died in 1947.
The series quickly went downhill after that.
His widow, Holloway, tried to continue as a lead author, but she was pushed out by the publisher.
That was pretty common at the time. In the late 1940s, women were often forced to give away their job to World War II veterans. That was not a favorable period for the career woman like Holloway.
Comics were also under assault because they were accused of perverting America's youth, so there was a lot of pressure on publishers to clean up their storylines. After Marston's death, Wonder Woman featured less bondage and less nudity, as well as less feminism. And ultimately, it attracted fewer readers.
Wonder Woman had a big comeback in the 1970s as part of the second wave feminist movement. She was a woman who was strong while remaining feminine, which made her a role model for feminists who wanted to have it all. She appeared on the cover of the first issue of Miss Magazine in 1972, and the early comic book issues from the Marston era were reprinted for a new generation of readers. And there was the TV series and the movies.
Despite all the renewed public interest, the public was unaware of the real story behind Wonder Woman, the links to Margaret Sanger, the suffragette movement, the polygraph machine, and a slightly creepy man named William Marston.
Is there time for one last song?
You know the song.
The Wonder Woman theme song from the original TV series, please?
You got that right.
All the world is waiting for you and the power you possess. In your satin tights, fighting for your right, and the old red, white, and blue.
Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman.
Now the world is ready for you and the wonders you can do. Make a hawk a dove, stop a war with love, make a liar tell the truth.
Wonder Woman, get us out from under. Wonder Woman,
All our hopes are pinned upon you and the magic that you do. Stop the moving cold, make the axes fall, change their minds and change the world.
Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman, you're a wonder, Wonder Woman.
You just listened to the theme song from Wonder Woman TV series, and I'm Amber Hale.
And I am Philippe Girard. Today we cover the story behind Wonder Woman.
This program was funded by a Juliet Hardner Grant for Women in the Humanities. For more information on how to help finance fellowships at McNeese, contact the Foundation at 337-475-5588.
This program was also sponsored by the History Department at McNeese. To apply for a degree in history or any other field, contact the McNeese Admissions Office at 337-475-5508.